This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Shannon Bream in for Brett Baer. The Boston Marathon bomber has been sentenced to death. But first, breaking news on the Amtrak train crash. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Correspondent William LaJeunesse looks at the Amtrak funding debate and what bang taxpayers have been getting for their billions of bucks. But first, correspondent Leland Vittert is on the ground in Philadelphia, where an NTSB news conference just wrapped up with some very interesting information. Good evening, Leland.
Good evening, Shannon. The FBI is now joining this investigation to figure out what caused a large dent in the lower left-hand area of the locomotive in question. A commuter train on these very same tracks the night of the accident reported either being shot at or hit by a rock, and a conductor on the train seems to remember her engineer of the Amtrak train saying something similar happened to their train. Now, obviously, the best information would be from the engineer, who the NTSB just got done interviewing. However, the last thing he remembers of Tuesday night was ringing his bell at a station 3 miles from here. Investigators say they don't yet know why the train accelerated from 70 miles per hour to 106 in the minute before it approached a sharp curve. Experts say the engineer must manually increase the throttle for the train to speed up.
The throttle, unlike your car, which maybe, is variable, there are set positions for the throttle. We call them notches, and the top speed is 8th notch.
Brandon Bastian's attorney says the train driver doesn't remember much about the crash because of a concussion. But Bastian has reportedly been outspoken about train safety, writing on online forums about changes to work and rest rules. What will you say, he wrote on trainorders.com, when the crew that's been on duty for longer than 12 hours accidentally falls asleep and passes a stop signal, killing dozens or hundreds of people? At least one of Tuesday's victims, an Amtrak employee, feels he already knows why the train crashed. His lawyer filed suit even before most of those killed have been buried.
Whether they believe it's a personnel-oriented or mechanical aspect of their equipment or a failure to have a proper electronic signal system, all the negligence lies on Amtrak in this case.
If installed and working properly on the track, technology called positive train control could have prevented the accident. But an Amtrak Inspector General report says the, quote, most serious challenge to implementing PTC is acquiring radio frequency, needed for ground-based sensors to communicate with the train and keep it under the speed limit. The NTSB says the engineer does not remember being fatigued on Tuesday night, and once again, Shannon used this opportunity to demand inward-facing cameras in the cabs of locomotives that would provide a record of what would have happened in cases just like this. Back to you.
All right, Leland Vittert live there in Philly. Thank you. Democrats seem to be seizing the moment, using the crash as a launching point to argue for increased funding for Amtrak. Correspondent William LaJeunesse looks at the billions of taxpayer dollars Amtrak's already received and what, if anything, it has to show for it.
The first round of funding will focus on projects that can create jobs and benefits in the near term.
In 2009, President Obama gave Amtrak $1.3 billion in stimulus funds. Amtrak prioritized that money to upgrade bridges, refurbish rail yards, restore stations, spending only a fraction on the safety system designed to slow a speeding train.
I can say confidently positive train control would have prevented this accident.
Amtrak needs to function better. They've improved, but they're still a long way from operating the way they should operate.
One reason Republican lawmakers don't want to give Amtrak more money is how it spends what it already gets. The railroad's inspector general says Amtrak loses $80 million a year just selling food. Auditors found it charges $2 for a soda with overhead that cost taxpayers $3.40, $9.50 for a hamburger that cost us more than $16. Taxpayers also subsidize every Amtrak food worker by $68,000.
If we want to keep giving Amtrak billions of dollars, we may as well take billions, throw them in a dumpster, put a match to it, and burn the money.
Congress isn't blameless. It mandated 40% of stimulus money be spent outside the Northeast, even though that's where it's needed. Nationwide, 41 of 44 routes lose money. Take New Orleans to Los Angeles. Taxpayers subsidize price each passenger $500 over and above what they pay for a ticket.
It's more like a rolling pork barrel. They spend some money here to make this senator happy. They spend some money there to make that mayor happy. And as a result, we have under-maintained and facilities that haven't been improved enough.
Now, Congress required Amtrak to install positive track control on 70,000 miles of track by the end of this year. Right now, they're at 400 and maybe 1,200 by January. But in addition to the radio frequency issue, the Inspector General blamed Amtrak's, quote, fragmented budgeting process. Shannon?
Yeah, we'll talk more about that with the panel. William, thank you. Now to Boston, where, as we told you, the marathon bomber will die for his savage attack that claimed innocent lives 2 years ago. That is the verdict from a jury of his peers. Correspondent Molly Lyon is outside the courthouse in Boston tonight. Good evening, Molly.
Good evening. 7 women, 5 men, after more than 14 hours of deliberations, determined that death was the appropriate sentence for the convicted marathon bomber to render justice in this case. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev retained his predictably indifferent demeanor as his fate was shared with a packed courtroom filled with survivors and victims' family members. Some of the jurors were tearful, their task complete, ending the many weeks viewing graphic evidence and listening to heart-wrenching testimony. When twin bombs placed by Tsarnaev and his brother Tamerlan exploded at the finish line of Boston's iconic marathon in April of 2013, 264 people were injured, some horrifically maimed, and 3 killed. 8-year-old Martin Richard, 23-year-old Lindsay Liu, and 29-year-old Crystal Marie Campbell. Later, the 2 terrorists ambushed and executed MIT police officer Sean Collier. Prosecutors said the brothers were equal partners, that Tsarnaev was inspired by radical jihad.
The defendant was an adult who came to believe in an ideology of hate, and he expressed those beliefs by killing, maiming, and mutilating innocent Americans on Patriots' Day.
Survivors of the attack are beginning to weigh in, including Dick Donahue, a transit officer who nearly bled to death after being struck by a bullet during the brothers' standoff with police in Watertown, Massachusetts. In a ceremony today, Officer Donahue was promoted to sergeant. He writes, "We can finally close this chapter in our lives. The verdict, undoubtedly a difficult decision for the jury, gives me relief and closure, as well as the ability to keep moving forward." A formal sentencing date has yet to be set. Shannon.
All right, Molly, thank you so much. Homegrown terrorists present a serious threat all over the world. In the UK, ISIS is attracting new members at an alarming rate. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott reports from London with the startling number of recruits drawn to extremism.
In the UK, homegrown terrorism isn't a threat, it is a reality. Scotland Yard coming out with findings showing that the rise of ISIS is radicalizing hundreds ready to fight in the Mideast and ready to fight at home. According to officials here, at least 700 suspected terrorists left the UK to fight in Syria and Iraq, often with ISIS. Half of them have returned. And in a recent 12-month period, there were 338 terror arrests, a record. 203 people either convicted or awaiting trial.
The reports of the numbers coming back, those are the people that we really need to worry about.
Also unsettling is an increase in women and teens going radical. 3 young British women were seen transiting through Turkey to Syria earlier this year. Their whereabouts are now unknown. A woman was arrested today, suspected of raising terror funds. According to officials, ISIS is sending a message to newly converted extremists: carry out violent attacks at home.
It is about seeking revenge against the West and driving fear and terror into the hearts of the enemy. That's how they see it, and we sadly are that enemy.
The UK government takes these dangers seriously but wants to do more. Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron's big win last week means he will push new anti-terror laws through Parliament, including more phone surveillance.
We need to combat those in society who are promoting hatred and intolerance, who are rejecting the values that we share in our pluralistic British society.
And focus more attention on social media. Authorities here say they are taking down 1,000 terror-related posts a week.
In fact, according to terror expert Stewart, a big reason behind the ugly success of ISIS is its mastery of online messaging, reaching smartphones and bedrooms, powerful and dangerous. Shannon.
Greg Palcott, thank you. Dozens of security forces are dead in Iraq after ISIS captured multiple buildings in Ramadi and torched government headquarters. Correspondent Kevin Corke reports from the White House on the significance of the terror group's assaults.
Supporters called it a symbolic victory for ISIS, one that critics say threatens to overwhelm the Obama doctrine in Iraq. After fierce fighting, witnesses report the Islamic State's black flag hung over a government compound in the Iraqi city of Ramadi. Using 6 suicide car bombs, militants overran much of the western provincial capital. The incursion comes as the Islamic State released an audio message, purportedly of its leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. A voice resembling al-Baghdadi's, who, by the way, hasn't been seen publicly for months, called on his followers to battle the infidels, saying, quote, "Islam was never a religion of peace. Islam is the religion of fighting." From the White House to the Pentagon, administration officials downplayed the significance of the compound seizure in Ramadi, suggesting it was a propaganda victory more than anything else. General Thomas Widley, chief of staff of the U.S.-led Combined Joint Task Force, saying, quote, "Iraqi security forces continue to control most of the key facilities." White House spokesman Eric Schultz added that the coalition was still doing the job.
The Iraqi security forces are focused there. The U.S. coalition is performing the role that the president has envisioned, and that's why we're focused on it.
The drama in the Middle East unfolded mere hours after the conclusion of the President's Gulf Cooperation Council summit at Camp David, in which the White House promised an enhanced security posture for its partners in the region to combat ongoing threats from countries like Iran, who have backed Houthi rebels in Yemen and recently disrupted shipping lanes in the Gulf. Still, the summit failed to make the splash the White House hoped for, as 4 of the 6 leaders invited skipped the event, including the King of Bahrain, who opted to go to a horse show with the Queen of England.
The Arab states are going to pursue other alternatives, and I mean specifically talking to Russia and China about getting them involved for further protection. It's a real deterioration of America's posture in the Middle East.
Shannon, you heard me mention Iran in the piece. I want to share something with the viewers very quickly. The House this week overwhelmingly passed legislation that would give it the right to review and possibly even reject any arms deal with the regime. But we're told by the administration tonight, the White House, that the president will in fact sign that into law. Back to you.
Interesting. All right, Kevin Corke, live at the White House. Thank you, Kevin. Up next, $200 million for a website that doesn't work and likely never will. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. KTTV in Los Angeles with some much-needed rain in drought-stricken California. Flooding has occurred in some areas where more than 1.5 inches of rain has fallen. Experts say anything that is precipitation is welcome, but the drought is far from over. KSAZ in Phoenix with 92 puppies rescued from a puppy mill now being cared for by inmates. The focus now is on getting those little pups healthy, removing ticks, cleaning them up, while that case is still under investigation. And this is a live look at New Orleans from Fox 8. The big story there tonight is the King of Blues is dead. B.B. King's 70-year career took him from poverty in Mississippi to traveling the world and playing shows into his 80s. Among his many accolades, King received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President George W. Bush, gave a guitar to Pope John Paul II, and sang Sweet Home Chicago with President Obama. King was 89 years old.
That is... Let's have some fun. You only live but once, and when you're dead, you're done. Let the good times roll. Let the good times